but the show will continue. The show will continue. And I'm so happy to introduce to some of you a great presenter that we will be having in Yushima Burks Cherry. She is awesome. She is actually a part of my all-star team with Aspire Counseling Consulting Services. She's an excellent therapist, so versed. I'm telling you, all going to love her. She does training. She does all kind of things. This is what she does. This is what she does. So I knew when I had this problematic situation just to occur. This is why a lot of people don't step into this, because you gotta have. I ain't gonna lie, man. I've been a little stressed out. Okay, but we have a ram in the thicket, and she is going to show up and represent, and she's going to be speaking on. I promise you all, you'll enjoy it. Yushima is awesome. I mean, I'm so blessed. I don't know why God allows me to connect with such great people, but it's just been awesome. But she's been a part of the team, and she's like, look, I feel like you got me riding the bench or something. I'm ready to shine. She's been telling me she's been wanting to do the training, and she's showing up, and she's going to be speaking on the topic of help the healer heal. Self-care for the soul. Help the healer heal, self-care for the soul. And so this is a topic for many of us that are in social work and helping us to heal, because many of us have our own situations that we battle with. And so we need to learn how to set healthy boundaries as far as our work. We need to develop self-care plans to learn how to enjoy life again. And that's what we're going to learn in this session coming up. We need to identify our strengths and needs to take the professional quality of life assessment. That's something that she's going to present to us. But this training is going down today, God willing. It's just stuff been trying to get in the way, but we're still pushing it. And we're so happy. We got a lot of people with Yushima Burks Cherry. Please come out and join us. Sign up. We have the information in the announcements. This training will be live today. It will count as a live training at 5:30 p.m. Hope to see you there. Y'all take care now. Bye.
Hey, thank you, Choya. I cannot live up to that. Thank you so much. I sure appreciate you all for having me. I'm glad that you all showed up. I told Choya things happen for a reason, and self-care for the professional and self-care for the soul is something that we absolutely can all use and work on, especially if you're in a helping profession. I'm assuming most of us are social workers here or have a degree in social work or some type of caregiving careers. So without further ado, the name of this workshop is Help the Helper Heal. Self-care for the professional is also self-care for the soul. And before we get into it, I want to ask you a question. And feel free to use the chat. I love a chat. Feel free to use your chat. So what does trauma look like? When you think about trauma, you think about someone who's been traumatized. What does that look like? What picture comes into mind? So you can use your chat, tell me. Also, I want to let you know that you will get a digital workbook that goes along with this. It looks like this, but it's in digital form. Can you see it? You probably can't see it because of how I have it set up. But it's a real workbook. It's just in digital form. Good, Whitney. Thank you. Fear. So this person looks fearful, uncomfortable. It could be any disruption to one's life. Yes. Distress. It does. It looks different on everyone. Good. Frozen. Awesome. So when you envision trauma, I want you to think about a coworker that you may have had, a classmate that's just always happy, bubbly, bringing donuts for everybody all the time. Seems like they have it all together. They come in, good morning, even on Mondays, right? Just happy, good morning. And you just be like, good morning, like, okay. Probably get on your nerves. That was me. I was that happy, bubbly person that came in every single day. And I actually received a complaint for being too bubbly. Like this was during my graduate school internship at a place I would not name. And yep, Latasha, you too. Just happy. Just But what they didn't know is I was masking. You hear me? I was going through the worst trauma of my life, something that I never thought would happen. And so it looks like someone can be happy, healthy, and whole, and they can be crumbling before your eyes. We all have been there at one point or another. If you've ever had any type of traumatic situation in your life and you still had to get up and go to work, you still had kids to take care of, or you just had to take care of yourself, you had a spouse or somebody that depends on you, life doesn't stop. And yes, people self-medicate. They can be, in a position where depression has them stuck in a bed. But most of the times we just push on, especially as helpers. Our trauma tends to get compartmentalized and we push on in spite of, which is also not healthy. Okay, so let's get into it. Today we're going to identify the challenges of working with at-risk individuals. We'll have definitions of terms that we will use during the presentation. You'll have an opportunity to identify your own vulnerabilities and the tools needed to move forward with a really good assessment, you guys. But you won't get that until you get your digital workbook. And Choya will tell you how to get that. I can also put the link in the chat. You'll learn how to thrive within the 8 dimensions of wellness, and you'll achieve more balance in your life by incorporating boundaries and activities to help you discover your passions and your purpose. When was the last time you did something you were really passionate about besides work? Something that was just fun. So we're going to talk about that. Now you'll find that we will not stay on each slide for a long time because there's a time constraint, but I will not rush the process. I do want to respect your time and get you out in an hour, okay? So how many of you have heard of imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is real. Yes, it is real, especially if you start to come through with some things that's working out in your life, or people give you accolades that you hear and it's like, wait, me? What do you mean, right? As a professional who has accomplishments, some of you may be experiencing imposter syndrome. It's loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. It's disproportionately affecting high-achieving people who find it difficult to accept their accomplishments. Many question whether they're deserving of the accolades in the first place. We usually process this issue during sessions or in a class environment like this, but today we're going to focus on our greatness and acknowledge our accomplishments. What is something that you do well? Ooh, you're about to get into private practice. Ooh, it's really going to hit you then because you're going to have people knocking down at your door, I'm sure. And you're going to be like, what's happening right now? Okay, so if you've ever experienced imposter syndrome, or if you haven't, I want to know what's something that you do well. What's something that you do well? Put it in the chat. Yes, Marie, good job. What's something that you've always done well? Instructing others. So teaching is a strong, I love that too. It's so fun to me. This is not work to me. Communication, encouraging, helping, listening. Good. Now I want you, oh yeah, good, okay. Look, Choya, we got somebody else that loves to do presentations now. I'm gonna have to put you in the Rolodex. Being a good resource, yes. Teaching, helping, being a resource, good. All right, empowering people, and that's very important. Tanisha, that is very important. Yes, being able to empower people so they're not dependent on you. Good, and we'll talk about that more. Hey, boo. All right, so let's keep going here. You guys, let's see. Okay, so when you're committing yourself to focus on your self-care throughout your career, that means that you value yourself. For some reason, society makes you believe that the less you take care of yourself, the more dedicated you are to the cause. It's almost like you have to become a martyr for the cause. And it's only in the helping profession. No one does this to bankers. No one does this to lawyers. It's just a helping profession where we're expected to give up on ourselves and be here for everybody else. In order for you to be successful in your relationships and in your profession, you have to commit to self-care. Yes. And it's not selfish. That is right, Rebecca. Self-care is not selfish. All right. So let's see. So we already went over imposter syndrome. We're going to talk about self-care, trauma, compassion fatigue, compassion satisfaction, burnout, projection transference, and countertransference. Self-care defined. Self-care refers to activities and practices that we can engage in on a regular basis to reduce stress and maintain and enhance our short and longer term health and well-being. The key is, you guys, to do this on a regular basis, not when we're about to pass out. Self-care is necessary for your effectiveness and success in honoring your professional and personal commitments. Okay, so I need somebody to put their thing on mute. Choya? Okay, you're going to mute it. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. All right. Yep, you muted me. Did you mute me? Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, it's okay. You have to mute everybody. That's fine. Hey, that's all right. All right, so self-care is... Oh, it's okay. Self-care is necessary for your effectiveness and success in honoring your professional and personal commitments, you guys. So what is trauma? We spoke earlier about what trauma looks like, how it shows up in professionals, how it shows up in helpers, right? So what is trauma? Usually when we talk about trauma, we talk about secondary trauma. But what we fail to realize and recognize is that a lot of helpers have experienced interpersonal trauma before they even began working in their profession. And if you don't address the trauma that you've been through, this can be detrimental to your clients, participants, and to your own personal well-being, right? If you don't address those issues that you experienced during childhood, high school, young adulthood, and even now, some of you may be going through some traumatic events right now, right? You may have lost someone that you love. You may have been sick, or someone that you love have been sick. There's all types of assaults and abuse and relationship issues out here. So we have to be able to identify and address our own interpersonal trauma in order for us to be as effective as we want to be with helping others. So when we process trauma in a professional setting, we need to first begin to work on our own interpersonal issues, be this in therapy or in a situation where you have supervision, and we'll talk about that more. So what is interpersonal trauma? It involves events in which we've been hurt by other people. This can include strangers, acquaintances, friends, or loved ones. Pain caused by others, especially if it's repeated over a period of time. It can be significantly harder to overcome, and you end up having difficulties in relationships and other issues, okay? Secondary trauma is defined as indirect exposure to trauma through a first-hand account or narrative of a traumatic event. Secondary traumatization is also referred to as compassion fatigue, and vicarious traumatization. Okay, so if you have a client or you have clients that's high risk, that's coming in and they're always talking about abuse, or they always find themselves in some type of abusive or situation where they are lacking in a need, this can also cause secondary trauma. All right. Compassion fatigue is a condition that occurs when caregivers are overwhelmed by stresses stemming from either the clinical or interpersonal components of their role. Individuals affected by compassion fatigue are unable to deliver highest quality care and are at risk for burnout. And we'll talk more about compassion fatigue. Actually, when you get your digital workbook, there will be a assessment in that workbook for you to take to measure your compassion fatigue, compassion satisfaction, and burnout. Okay? Compassion satisfaction is about the pleasure you derive from being able to do your work well. It's the reason why you started doing whatever profession that you're doing. Your compassion satisfaction is how you feel when you positively assist your colleagues or your participants. What's burnout? It's a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. How many of you work in a stressful environment? Pretty much everyone here that's logged on, I'm sure. Yes, yes, high stress environment. And you're expected to be on at all times, right? It doesn't matter how stressful it is, you have to be able to navigate all of those things that show up. Oh, that's nice, Marie. That's nice. Yes. So Marie says she no longer works in that environment. Ooh. Oh, yeah. Inpatient. Yes. And I can only imagine how stressful doing assessments or working in inpatient psychiatry is. Okay, so a professor explained this to me the best. And I don't know if you all went to Alabama A&M, but she said, Yushima, I don't know if you know who talks like that with a real soft, sweet voice. She said, Yushima, I'm going to tell you what burnout is. Burnout is working in an environment where you do not have the tools to do your job efficiently and effectively. And basically having to pull things out of your hat to make it work. That is a great example of how people get burnt out. Not having to support the tools and the resources that you need to do your job. Projection is the mental process by which people attribute to others what's on their own mind. An example of this is someone who has low self-esteem or someone who is in a self-critical state who sees two people speaking and they automatically assume that they're talking about them, right? That's projection. Oh, they must be talking about me. Yes. Marie. Transference. Transference occurs when a person redirects some of their feelings or desires for another person onto an entirely different person. Like if you see somebody at your job and they remind you of a relative, or if you get a therapist and they remind you of someone that you used to date in high school, right? Transference is common and it happens mostly from the perspective of the client to the therapist. Now, when we have the issue from therapist to client, it occurs when the therapist projects their own unresolved conflicts onto the client. This can be in response to something the client has unearthed during the session. Although many now believe it to be inevitable, countertransference can be damaging if not appropriately managed. Have you ever had a client that you either connected with too much, right? Or you just could not stand them for some reason and you just didn't know why? Or maybe you did know why because they remind you of somebody, your little sister or something that get on your nerves. Or they remind you of another client. Or you had someone else in their family. And so that just triggers an emotion in you. Yes. If you've been in this profession for longer than 6 months and you have not had that happen, kudos to you. And I need you to teach this next class because listen, we've all been there in one way or another. And most of the time we're able to manage these issues, right? We're able to navigate these murky waters. But if you're not taking care of yourself, it's going to leak out and you're going to find yourself full-fledged going in on your poor clients. And they're just not going to know what's going on with you. But you might end up losing some of them, right? You may end up before the board somewhere, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to talk about the assessment right now, just very briefly. Yeah, you said leak out. Yes, it could leak out onto everybody, just on everybody. And that's not what you want to do. When we finish this and you receive your digital workbook, please take that assessment to measure your compassion satisfaction and compassion fatigue and your burnout levels. And I really want to know how you did on that. And the digital workbook will help you work through the rest of your issues. We're going to have this in workbook form, so don't worry about it, okay? We're going to get to it. And this just kind of describes what that is. But you'll have opportunity to look at it. So let's go right into self-care. Self-care for professionals has consequences that can impact some employees' licensures and or careers. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the NASW Code of Ethics that has been amended to include a new language in the purpose section that reads, professional self-care is paramount to competent and ethical social work practice. Professional demands, challenging workplace climates, and exposure to trauma warrant that social workers maintain personal and professional health, safety, and integrity. Social work organizations, agencies, and educational institutions are encouraged to promote organizational policies, practices, and materials to support social workers' self-care. But what happens if your job does not do it? What happens if you're in an environment that does not do these practices and makes it conducive to your own personal self-care? What happens? You're responsible for it. Ooh, I wish we could get some of those ethic points. Don't put that on me. Look, let's talk to Choya about that. Choya, you can give us some ethics CEUs for this since we're talking about ethics for a couple of minutes. Go and sprinkle some of those points in here. That's right. It's your responsibility, but I'd also be looking for another job. But Jonay, ooh, I like that. Is it common for jobs to create an environment that's conducive to your own personal self-care? I have yet to find a job where that is the main focus and the main goal. Now, we can create that environment ourselves. That's it. Just work and work and work, right? We can create that environment ourselves, but we have to set some very healthy boundaries in order for us to be able to do that. So we'll talk about that again later on, okay? So let's see. Supervision is self-care. It doesn't matter what your profession is, you need to have a listening ear. It is, I don't know how many of you go to therapy and you don't need to tell your business. I'm a therapist and I have a therapist. I'm not playing any games with anybody's lives. I want to be able to process my stuff one-on-one. So like you said earlier, it's not leaking out on my clients during their sessions, right? We want to be able to focus on them. I probably have a therapist too. She is the bomb, okay? And we have to be self-aware enough to know that we cannot monopolize a session. I had someone that I knew years ago that I used to work with, and we would be in group, and this person would talk about their own issues during the whole group, and these people had to pay out of pocket for this group, right? If that person had their own therapist, they had a safe space where they were able to disclose all of these things, they would have had the energy and the wherewithal to focus on the clients at that time. But that happens if you're not taking care of yourself. It's also been recommended that you seek counsel outside of your employer to ensure an unbiased stance and to remove the fear of being judged or reprimanded for sharing something that may implicate unethical practices, right? Because it's hard to go to your supervisor and complain to your supervisor about your supervisor, unless you want to be calling the unemployment office or if you just want your job to be more difficult, right? If you have someone that you trust, Choya does supervision. Call them up. That way you won't have to worry about it. You can complain and come up with solutions all you want to without being reprimanded. Okay, so what does self-care for professionals look like? Self-care for professionals is about actively looking after your own mental health and well-being so that you can more effectively support the population that you work with. If you've ever been on an airplane before liftoff, the stewardess usually says what? Think about being on an airplane. What does the stewardess tell you in the little walkie-talkie? What do they come on and say? Mask yourself first. In the unlikely event of an emergency, Fit your own oxygen mask first before attending to children or dependents. That's it. Put your own oxygen mask on first. You're not going to be a benefit to anybody if you up here about to pass out. Now, the 6 people you could have saved, they passed out too, right? Because now nobody's getting the ear that they need. But what if you were to put your own mask on first? How many lives can you save? How many people can you help and assist during that process? That's all self-care is. Engaging in activities and practices that give you energy, lower your stress, and contribute to your well-being. Self-care's activities will be different for everyone, and we're going to go over some later. Doing these activities regularly before the crisis hits, noticing when your stress is manageable and your physical, emotional, and well-being is enhanced, making a commitment to your health and well-being for today and into the future. It's all about having a plan. You know that you're in a high-stress environment. You have to be ready to manage these high-stress situations that's going to come up. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. You just have to be ready for it. Have you ever felt that you felt the client? So hold on, let me see. Nidra said, a lot of that we call self-care is, ooh, that's a huge, great point. A lot of the stuff that we call self-care is aftercare. It's like going to the emergency room, right? Instead of taking preventative measures, you find yourself on the back end just trying to recover. And in recovery and self-care are 2 very different things. Recovery is on the back end and self-care is preventative. So that's a great point. Need a great point. Have you ever felt that you failed a client? Now some of y'all might be like, no, never. What? Me? Mm-mm. And some of y'all might be like, yeah. So what am I talking about? So listen, if you've ever found yourself in a position where you zone out during a session when people are talking to you, you just go blank and they be like, so did you hear me? And you be like, mm-hmm. And you did not, right? Or if you find yourself where you're not able to remain present because you have something on your mind that occurred earlier, or you've been triggered by something, so now you're processing your own stuff. If you find yourself overly involved in a client's life, their decisions, you find yourself detached and praying that this session will hurry up and end, or you pray that somebody cancel. But it's not because you just need a break. It's because that client is coming and you just be like, oh, 7 minutes passed. They got 8 more minutes to get here and I'm rescheduling. I'm not playing with them today, right? Because you have an issue with them, right? Lord, yes, right? So does that mean we've necessarily failed them? I think we failed ourselves more, but it's okay because it happens to everybody. And we're going to talk about ways to prevent this. The truth of the matter is we literally have lives hanging in the balance of our decisions. We have people that depend on us to make decisions that will benefit them and hold them in high esteem, right? So when we're not taking care of ourselves, or we find ourselves in a position where we're not present for our clients, it does them such a disservice. When we fail to take care of ourselves, when we fail to see things objectively, and we can't see past our own hurt, our trauma and issues show up in the way that we help our community, that we interact with our loved ones, and the ways that we show up for ourselves. So what am I talking about here? There is a person that from my hometown who is seen as, this person has a doctorate. This person is known in the community. This person makes decisions and helps write laws for people, for predators. Okay. So we were having a conversation because the work I did before I started doing what I'm doing is I help victims of child sexual abuse, domestic violence, neglect, and all other trauma. And so we were discussing a case that she had. And she said that this little girl told her that her grandfather had been fondling her and that she was forced to fondle him. She described his genitalia to the T. This little girl was 5 years old. There's no way this person would have been able to describe this young person who had never been exposed to anything. And she's telling a story about what happened about her granddad. And the woman, the doctor, said, I'm not going to take that little girl out that house. She better be glad her granddad took custody of her and her 3 sisters, because she would be in foster care if she didn't. If she wasn't here, she would be in foster care. I'm not going to call him a pedophile. Much worse has happened to me, and I'm okay. This is what trauma looks like. This is how it shows up in the way that we serve our community. The children were never removed out the home. He was never labeled a sex offender or a predator. He never had to report. He was just let off the hook. Somebody needs to mute there. Choya, I guess you're about to mute us again. You're finna mute us again, Choya. What you about to do? Okay. So this is why it's super important, you guys, to be present and to be self-aware and to get the healing that you need so that your cuts aren't bleeding on everybody else. That hurt my heart, and we had a great discussion, but when I say she was not feeling me after I said what I needed to say, it just didn't work out. And so we haven't spoken, but I do keep her in my prayers, okay? We just gotta pray for folks. All right. So I want to know, how did you choose your career? Did you choose this field, or did it choose you? Because most of us knew when we were little that we wanted to help people. It chose you. I know. How many times have you tried to run from your career and it just will not let you go? It got a grip. It just got you, right? It chose you. Listen, I fully understand. Reasons why we choose these professions: we want to make a difference. Some people have had family issues that they want to learn more about, and so they choose a field that will help them. They want answers about themselves. Yes, and personal issues pertaining to your own life. And some of us just, like you said, we're just chosen, and you can do nothing about it. You can run if you want to, Gideon. No, that's not Gideon. What's his name? Jonah. Jonah in the whale, child. Jonah in the whale. Okay, so treating the whole person. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. So we're going to talk about the 8 dimensions of wellness. How do we treat the whole person? We have all of these dimensions of wellness within us, within our everyday life. These dimensions of wellness create who we are. And this comes from the SAMHSA website, okay? Social, physical, emotional, occupational, intellectual, financial, environmental, and existential or spiritual wellness. So we're going to talk about each of these, and we're going to wrap up. Social wellness refers to the relationships we have and how we interact with others. Our relationships can offer support during difficult times. Social wellness involves building healthy, nurturing, and supportive relationships, as well as fostering a genuine connection with those around you. If you find that your client has connected on a social level that is outside of your job description, and they tell you that you remind them of their aunt or cousin or uncle, what is that called? If you remind your client of somebody, what is that called? Do you remember? It's transference. So I want you to remember this. Transference, okay? Social wellness goals. So we're going to stick to professional wellness, you guys, because we just don't have time to go over both. But again, you will receive this in your free workbook, so don't worry about it. So professional wellness goals: pursuing healthy relationships in the workplace with boundaries that's appropriate for work, which includes not being too rigid and cold, but not oversharing your personal lives to your coworkers and your clients, okay? Refrain from gossiping and discussing sensitive matters to your coworkers and clients, because guess what? It will come back to bite you. Autonomy of persons. You have to allow your clients to make their own decisions, even if you don't agree with them. Contributing to the common welfare of your community, and recognizing that oneself and society are interdependent. Okay, so those are social wellness goes. So check in with me. How would you rate your social wellness? How would you rate your social wellness on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being, what do you mean social wellness? The worst, right? And 5 being social wellness, I am a pro at that. 1 to 5, how would you rate your own personal stuff? 3.5? Ooh, that's good. 3, 3.5. 2-ish. 3. Yes, 2. I might be a 2.5. We have a lot of 3s in here. Good. 3s and 2s, right? Nobody's a 5. Nobody's coming strong with the social wellness. Yes, that's me all day. So there's some improvement that we can make. So let's see. If you have 2s and 3s, let's see what we can do about that moving forward. So if you ended up having a 2 or 3 or a 4 or even a 1, what changes can you make to improve your social well-being by 1 point? What can you do in your social life to improve it by 1 point? When you think about the 1 point, and again, feel free to put it in the chat. Feel free to put it in your digital workbook when you get it. Write it down in some notes, okay? And then tell me, what can you do to raise it by 2 points, personally and professionally? And then I want to know when you will implement these changes, because we'll say something, and if you don't put a date to that thing, it's probably not going to happen. So you have to be intentional about doing some of these things, to the point to where you may need to put this stuff on a calendar, okay? Put it on the calendar. Okay, let's talk about your physical wellness. Listen to your body, people. Physical wellness is the ability to maintain a healthy quality of life that allows us to get through our daily activities without undue fatigue or physical stress. If you forget everything else about this presentation, I want you to remember this. Listen to your body. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but please go to the bathroom when you have to pee. Get up from your desk and go to the bathroom. Your clients won't die. Your notes won't disappear. Go to the bathroom, people. It's not optional, okay? You're going to end up with all kind of problems. Well, guess what, Choya? We have to make it work. We have to let our bodies do what it does, okay? Go to the bathroom, people. It is not a privilege. It's your right. It's your right. Some of us will hold it in. I'm talking to myself. Some of us will hold that in the way my 44-year-old bladder is. We just can't. We playing games at this point.